Welcome. You are listening to Aftersight. This recording is intended solely for individuals who are blind or have low vision.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for the September 2nd, Monday reading of the Colorado Sun. My name is Andrew Post, and today we will be reading the following main articles. At closed-door GOP meeting, supporters of Dave Williams reaffirm him as chair as dispute drags on. By Brian Eason. One of Colorado's least visited national monuments has dark skies, ancient cultures, and a whole bunch of dinosaurs. By Parker Yamasaki. 6 more Colorado communities consider raising their minimum wage. By Tamara Chang. Can you bring marijuana to Denver International Airport? By Justin George. Man arrested in Colorado dog breeder's killing, but the puppies are still missing. By members of the Associated Press. Poop, pee, cocaine. People bring more than just tubes to Colorado rivers over Labor Day weekend. By Shannon Mullaney, as well as following up with miscellaneous articles. To begin, at closed-door meetings, supporters of Dave Williams reaffirm him as chair as dispute drags on. This by Brian Eason. What comes next is that in the conflict isn't clear, but the dispute over the party's leadership likely won't be resolved internally by the state party and may need to be settled by the Republican National Committee or in court. In the Colorado Republican Party's second disputed meeting in as many weeks, supporters of Dave Williams on Saturday reaffirmed the far-right former lawmaker as party chair and attempted to invalidate a vote held last weekend, held to oust him. Few opponents of Williams attended the meeting, leaving the party with 2 landslide votes in either direction on consecutive Saturdays, one to keep him as chair and one to end his tumultuous tenure. What comes next in the fight over the party's leadership isn't clear, but the dispute appears increasingly unlikely to be resolved internally by the state party, with both sides claiming that meeting held by the other faction was illegitimate. As a result, it may need to be settled by the Republican National Committee or in court. Armed security guards at the entrance Saturday prohibited journalists from the Colorado Sun and other media outlets from attending the gathering held at the Rock Church in Castle Rock, a suburb south of Denver. The closed-door meeting came after the party had kicked a Sun reporter out of its April meeting, sparking outcry from Republican elected officials who said that the public should be able to observe the party's business. At that one, other reporters were allowed to attend. Saturday's meeting was live-streamed on Facebook. In remarks before the vote, Williams said that he served at the will of the party and its members, and offered to step aside if that was what the majority's preference. If you'd like for us to leave, that's fine, Williams said. If you'd like for us to stay, that's fine too. But we hope to put this matter to rest today and demonstrate to the world that, in fact, there is no separate party that's running the show. The vote in Castle Rock was 191.5 to 10 against removing Williams as chair, but the matter was far from put to rest. For you see, a week earlier, in a Brighton meeting that was open to the press, Republicans voted 161.66 to 12 in favor of Williams's removal, then elected Eli Bremer, a former El Paso County GOP chair, to replace him. Some participants only have partial votes under party rules. The meeting today was not a legal meeting, Bremer told The Sun in an interview Saturday, and this is going to go to court. The Brighton rally was enough to meet a 60% threshold for Williams's removal, as required by party bylaws, but only under one interpretation of the rule. Supporters of Williams on Saturday voted for the rule to be interpreted as 60% of the entire Republican Central Committee, a group of more than 400 members, while opponents voted to interpret it as 60% of those present at the meeting. At the meeting, Williams's supporters blasted the Republicans seeking his removal, saying a quote-unquote minority faction was disrupting the party's ability to win the November election. Stop. It has to stop. The people in here that are stirring the pot, stop, said State Representative Brandy Bradley of Littleton during a debate before the vote was called. We need to be fighting the Democrats that are making this state unsafe. Opponents of Williams from the more moderate wing of the state GOP counter that his leadership has been detrimental to the party's chances of winning elections in Colorado, citing lackluster fundraising and a number of controversies, including homophobic and transphobic emails. Williams had also used his position to benefit his own unsuccessful bid for office and that of some of his allies. No one spoke against him at the meeting, and only a handful of elected Republicans were in attendance on the roll call vote. On Saturday, party members also approved changes to their bylaws that would make it harder to call special meetings to remove party leaders in the future. But that decision, too, remains in dispute, with a large chunk of the Central Committee voting to cancel Saturday's meeting in Castle Rock when they met on August 24th in Brighton. A similar state party chair controversy in Michigan earlier this year was decided by the RNC. The National Republican Congressional Committee, the GOP U.S. House campaign arm, said previously it would recognize the results of the Brighton meeting to remove Williams as chair. Both sides framed the dispute as a battle for the party's future and its ability to win elections in Colorado. Bremer said that the differences between the meetings in Brighton and Castle Rock showed why Williams had to be removed. We had 100% openness and transparency, Bremer said, in contrast to Williams's meetings, where the media and other observers were barred from attending. They would not allow many registered Republicans who showed up to come in and observe. But State Representative Scott Bottoms, an evangelical pastor from Colorado Springs, said his own election to the House 2 years ago showed that Republicans like Williams were winning. We've been slowly winning this battle, Bottoms said at the meeting in Castle Rock. The liberal Republicans can't stand that. Dave, you're our guy, Bottoms added. 100% we support you. One of Colorado's least visited national monuments has dark skies, ancient cultures, and a whole bunch of dinosaurs. What started as 8 dinosaur tailbones in 1909 has turned into 211,000 acres of Dinosaur National Monument. This by Parker Yamasaki. Dinosaur National Monument. When you work on a deep geologic timescale, you're bound to be late once in a while. Rebecca Hunt Foster, the paleontologist for Dinosaur National Monument, pulled her black pickup truck into the visitor center parking lot 15 minutes after our decided meeting time. She ditched her backpack in front of the Stegosaurus statue, ducked into the visitor center to fill a water bottle, then climbed back in her truck, license plate DINOCHK, to head to a nearby strip of hillside that she calls The Dig. Hunt Foster is the paleontologist for the entire national monument, a high desert outpost with a gradient of ecosystems, shifting from shaggy sagebrush hills to red desert rocks that span the Colorado-Utah border. The sprawling 211,000 acres, with some of the most complete geological records in the national park system, doesn't seem to faze her. When she worked for the Bureau of Land Management, her area covered close to 3.5 million acres in southern Utah, she said. She knows she'll never get to scrape, brush, and drill into most of the roughly 500 sites in Dinosaur that have been identified as containing fossils. She barely makes it out to her own dig 2 days per week. The rest of the time, she's working on funding applications, organizing volunteer groups, giving talks, working in the museum, reviewing construction plans, attending meetings, and hanging out with curious visitor groups. Part of my job is to make sure no fossils in the park get hurt, so that can lead to a lot of meetings, a lot of getting pulled in many different directions, she said. There's not as much time to sit at one site and just dig every day, which is what they did at the original quarry. In the beginning, the original quarry was discovered in August 1909 by Earl Douglas, a paleontologist from Pittsburgh who found 8 giant tailbones of an Apatosaurus, a late Jurassic longneck, sticking out of a sandstone slope in what is now the southwestern corner of the monument. 5 days after the discovery, Douglas recorded in his journal, observing throngs of people arriving from Vernal, Utah, to see the bones for themselves. For a time, the rocks that had never had the impress of a woman's foot and seldom that of a man's swarmed with people of all ages, Douglas wrote on August 22, 1909. These days, the monument draws anywhere from 250,000 to 350,000 visitors per year, a small dip from the monument's visitorship peak in the mid-90s, when the monument welcomed closer to 500,000 visitors per year. The monument peaked at 534,274 in 1993, coincidentally or not, the same year that Jurassic Park was released. Of course, when Douglas wrote about the newly trampled ground back in 1909, he wasn't accounting for the ancestral tribes that called dinosaurs shallow caves and rock overhangs home for hundreds of years prior to that. Archaeological evidence of the Fremont people, a name coined by the researchers who first studied the culture along the Fremont River in Utah, exists throughout the monument and dates as far back as 200 A.D. The Fremont culture's petroglyphs, carvings and etchings, and pictographs, paintings, can still be viewed from a handful of interpretive trails. One set of petroglyphs and pictographs on the wall of a sandstone alcove known as Swelter Shelter is located just a mile east of the quarry wall, where many hundreds of years after the images were etched and inked, Douglas would gawk at the adventurous visitors bust in from Vernal, Utah. In any case, Douglas's dinosaur findings devised a 13-year excavation funded by the Carnegie Museum, where Douglas worked, and managed by Douglas himself. In 1915, President Woodrow Wilson established the quarry and its surrounding 80 acres as Dinosaur National Monument. Andrew Carnegie died 4 years after the designation, and the museum pulled its funding from the excavation. By 1924, excavations ceased at the site, leaving behind a 150-foot-long slab that Douglas insisted remained for the public to marvel at and learn from. The slab was later encased by the Quarry Exhibit Hall, where today visitors can observe and in some places even touch a preserved logjam of Stegosaurus plates, Allosaurus femurs, Camarasaurus vertebrae, and 1,500 other fossil bones from 8 dinosaur species. Part of what makes the quarry wall such a great exhibit is the hardened sandstone that holds the fossils in place. Hunt Foster's current site, on the other hand, is situated in a thin strip of crumbly gray mudstone. This is what a quarry looks like in the beginning, Hunt Foster said, gesturing at the barely scratched hillside. What you get at the quarry wall, though, that's, of course, a perfect world. That's Disneyland over there. She took a flathead screwdriver and a cheap paintbrush and started wedging a little black nugget out of the wall. It came loose, and she turned it over in her bare hands. Looks like it actually might be another little Camptosaurus tooth, she said, brushing dirt off its surface. Or maybe a little toe bone, she mused, then grabbed her water bottle to clean up the tooth, or maybe toe. Oh, looks just like a piece of bone. See how it's broken here on the bottom part, she said. It looks like there used to be more of whatever this was, and then she lightly shoved it back into the wall where she found it. About half a foot away from the bone fragment was a big white bulb, a larger piece of bone wrapped in some kind of cast. My volunteer got a little overzealous about excavating around it, Hunt Foster explained, pointing at the covered chunk. I think that they thought that they were going to be able to just pop it out, and it turned out to be a bigger thing, which is fine. That's normal. I mean, they are dinosaurs. They have a tendency to become pretty large pretty quickly. The most dangerous species. In 1955, writer and environmentalist Wallace Stegner published an essay titled The Marks of Human Passage, in a collection about the environmental and historical importance of Dinosaur National Monument. By that time, the monument had grown from its original 80-acre quarry to over 200,000 acres that it occupies still today. The monument's current boundaries trace 2 deep river valleys, the Green and the Yampa, that meet at a midpoint in the park and continue flowing west, forming an upside-down T shape. In the 1950s, 2 dams were being debated as part of the Upper Colorado River Storage Project, one at Echo Park, where the 2 rivers meet, and the other at Split Mountain, farther down the Green. Stegner's essay was a part of a collection, quote-unquote, This is Dinosaur, which was delivered to every member of Congress and distributed throughout the West. We are the most dangerous species of life on planet. And every other species, even the Earth itself, has cause to fear our power to exterminate, Stegner wrote. But we are also the only species which, when it chooses to do so, will go to great effort to save what it might otherwise destroy. The dams were never built, and the Yampa is the only remaining free-flowing river in the Colorado River system. The Green is dammed upstream outside the National Monument boundary at Flaming Gorge. The modern-day asteroid. Invasive species. Today, the rivers remain a major recreational draw for the monument. Last year, Dinosaur received close to 19,000 applications in the rafting permits lottery system. The monument grants only 1 to 4 permits per day, depending on the season. Last year's applications arrived from people in all 50 states, Washington, D.C., and 10 countries, said Emily Spencer, a national resource specialist for the monument. Spencer, who has worked at Dinosaur for 15 years, has to track these things because the potential for invasive species hitching a ride into the park from, say, all 50 states, Washington, D.C., and 10 different countries, could have a huge impact on Dinosaur. Ultimately, people from 27 states and a handful of those other countries were granted permits. All of those people are bringing their gear and equipment from different places with different aquatic flora and fauna, Spencer said. This past season, she's been piloting new detection technology on the rivers in the hopes that Dinosaur will soon be able to partner with surrounding agencies to tackle the recent potentially devastating spread of zebra mussels and other aquatic invasives. The aquatic management is new to Spencer, and her learning curve has been steep, she said, but invasive species in general have infiltrated her whole career. One of Spencer's current landside efforts is eliminating invasive leafy spurges and Russian knapweed using a method called biological control, which in this case means collecting insects from Idaho, transporting them to northwestern Colorado, and releasing them along the river. Last year, Dinosaur National Monument was granted more than $500,000 from the Inflation Reduction Act to implement a 6-year-long biological control strategy. The grant funds necessary travel and equipment and administrative costs for Spencer and her crews to collect 4 insect species that feed specifically on the invasive plants, flea beetles and stem-boring beetles, to eat the leafy spurges, and the gall midge and gall wasp to control the Russian knapweed. The goal is to collect and release 50,000 to 100,000 insects per year. She also takes groups of volunteers on raft trips to help remove invasive tamarisk along the riverbanks, where they just yank out one plant at a time. The federal funding for biocontrol started this year and ends in 2030, and the aquatic invasive project that Spencer is helping pilot is in year 1 of, she paused to think about it, probably forever. We like to say that we are a medium-sized park, acreage-wise, with a small park staff, but big park complexities, said Sonia Popelka, interpretation supervisor for the monument. Popelka has been working at Dinosaur since 2012 and has collaborated closely with Spencer on a number of research and outreach projects, including the monument's International Dark Sky Park designation, which it received in 2019, and an ongoing monarch butterfly migration study. Spencer's daily to-do list would tire even the most enthusiastic naturalist, but she doesn't seem bothered by the scope of her work. Just like Hunt Foster, she's acclimated to the fact that many of the projects she starts today she'll likely never see the end of. Working with the National Park Service, where sites are set aside specifically for their national significance, the scale of that responsibility is pretty grand. It's also well outside of just the individual, Popelka said. It's constantly thinking about what I am doing in my work today that is making an improvement for somebody else, even when that somebody else might show up 100 years from now. Visiting Dinosaur National Monument. You see, there are 5 entrances to Dinosaur National Monument, 2 on the Utah side and 3 on the Colorado side. The most popular entrances are the Quarry entrance, accessed through Jensen, Utah, and the Harper's Corner entrance near the town of Dinosaur in Colorado. Both the Quarry and Harper Corners entrances have visitor centers with rangers, maps, and educational videos. Most of the known fossil sites are on the Utah side of the monument, accessed through the Quarry entrance, northeast of Jensen, Utah. The famous Quarry Wall has the fossils from the late Jurassic period preserved in a layer of rock called the Morrison Formation. The formation was named after the town of Morrison, just south of Red Rocks Amphitheater, where the formation was first described by geologists. The quarry wall is part of the Quarry Exhibition Hall, accessed through the quarry entrance outside of Jensen, Utah. The monument has one of the oldest and most complete geological records in all of the national park system. Dinosaur National Monument was designated as an International Dark Sky Park in April 2019. It became the 5th internationally recognized dark sky place in Colorado and the 12th in Utah. Harper's Corner Drive is a 32-mile scenic drive that leaves from the Canyon Visitors Center on the Colorado side of the monument, northeast of the town of Dinosaur, and winds its way above the monument's deep river canyons. There are several overlooks and picnic areas along the drive, along with 3 hiking trails. There are 6 designated campgrounds in the park, 3 on the Colorado side and 3 on the Utah side. The Green River Campground, accessible from the quarry entrance in Utah, is the largest of the 6, with 80 sites, 53 of which can be reserved online, and 27 of which are first come, first served. The Gates of Lodore, at the north entrance to the monument, is the most remote campground in the park. The nearest Colorado town, Maybell, is about 50 miles east of the campground. It is popular with rafters making their way down the Green River and rarely ever fills up. The town of Dinosaur was called Artesia until 1966, when the town changed its name to emphasize its proximity to the monument. The town has a gas station, a motel, a grill and sandwich shop. And for more amenities, Rangeley is about a 20-minute drive south from the Canyon Visitors Center and has a number of hotel, motel, and food options, as well as the Tank Center for Sonic Arts. The Colorado pike minnow, bony tail, and razorback sucker are federally listed endangered fish species native to the monument's rivers. Other species like the round-tailed chub, flannelmouth sucker, and bluehead sucker are also present and listed as species of concern in both Utah and Colorado. Dinosaur National Monument is on the northeastern side of Dinosaur Diamond National Scenic Byway, a 512-mile scenic driving route through Utah and Colorado that includes 9 national parks and monuments. Access the Diamond from I-70 in Grand Junction or highways 139, 64, or 40 in Colorado. And there are 6 more communities consider raising their minimum wage. A 2019 state law allows government officials to set their own starting point higher than the state's current $14.40 hourly minimum. This by Tamara Chang. At least 5 cities and 1 more Colorado county are considering raising their local minimum wage, which, if approved, could go into effect as soon as January 1st. The city councils of Boulder and Longmont heard presentations in August, while Lafayette, Erie, and Louisville are scheduled to hear consultant reports this month. Adams County spent August collecting feedback from citizens and plans to have an update Tuesday at its next study session for the board, according to county officials. The push for higher minimum wages appears to have a lot of public support, even from small businesses, though there's much less agreement on how much to raise wages and how fast. The high costs of housing, medical services, and living in Colorado are reason for the support, but the impact on small businesses that could see large wage hikes starting in January are also a concern being debated in the communities surrounding Denver, which adopted its local wage 5 years ago. For the 5 cities, which together hired consulting firm Econ Northwest to do an economic analysis, the interest was to get minimum wage in line with the higher rates in Denver, currently at $18.29, and unincorporated Boulder County, where hourly wages shot up to $15.69 this year. The recommendation was not that you have to do this, but for every municipality to look at all the data and decide whether you think it's appropriate to raise the minimum wage, said Andrew Dyke, a senior economist and partner at Econ Northwest. And if you do this, our recommendation would be to attempt consistency across the region, because that provides certainty. And one of the things that business owners like is certainty, and they don't like is uncertainty. Getting to one regional wage, however, seems unlikely. At the end of the Boulder City Council work session, August 22nd, two possible proposals emerged for draft ordinances. Neither lined up exactly with Denver or Boulder counties. The path forward also seemed unclear at the end of the Longmont meeting on August 27th, where discussion ended after the last person from the audience spoke. We want it done for Longmont. We don't want to copy and paste Denver. We don't want to copy and paste Boulder. We want what's right for our economy, said Mike Root, founder of Copper Sky Distillery in town, who was nearly the last person to speak during the public comment period. We have a unique position to be able to stand up for what Longmont wants and don't have to just do what the county tells us to do. Sandy Cedar, Longmont's assistant city manager, said that indeed the council didn't give any direction on next steps that evening. However, she added the council could make a motion at any meeting. While there's no deadline to adopt its own minimum wage, state law requires the local government engage stakeholders in public consultation, according to the rules. But a new wage can only start when the state's new rate starts on January 1st of any given year. So if not 2025, then a new wage would start in January 2026. Overall, though, there seemed to be agreement among local residents, council members, and the communities that the local minimum wage needs to rise. What I hear from so many in our community, including a lot of business owners too, is that we all pay when workers aren't paid enough. Workers are harmed, and so are we. We pay in rising numbers of evictions and homelessness and people needing financial assistance, more pollution and traffic from people driving longer distances to get to work, said Nicole Spear, Boulder's mayor pro tem, during a work session. A couple of years ago, it took 2 full-time jobs to make ends meet here. Now it takes 4. Denver's cost of living is 20% lower than ours, but their wage is almost 30% higher than ours. Local governments in Colorado were allowed to enact their own minimum wage after House Bill 1210 passed in 2019. Some restrictions were added, such as up to 33 cities or counties, or 10% of the state's 332 local governments, could adopt a local minimum wage. Annual increases could be no greater than 15% or $1.75 a year. The Colorado Municipal League, which advocates for local governments, supported the 2019 change, but Kevin Baumer, CML's executive director, said that their support behind the bill was to get in the room and help negotiate some guardrails, he said. One thing CML got in the bill was to allow regional agreements, which is what the Boulder area cities started out with last year. We agree with the business community that as much as I hate it when people use it, you could have a patchwork of different minimum wages with employees working for employers in multiple cities, he said. The idea, he added, was for intergovernmental agreements to harmonize local minimum wages across the region and go beyond county lines. Denver was the first city to adopt its own, sending its hourly minimum to $12.85 in 2020, while the state went to $12. Today, Denver's minimum is $18.29, compared with the state's $14.42. Both are pegged to changes in annual inflation, or the Consumer Price Index, so Denver's rate will increase to $18.81, while Colorado's grows to $14.81 on January 1st. This year, 2 more local governments added their own minimum after opting in last year. Unincorporated Boulder County, which had joined the regional effort but then passed its own increase ahead of everybody else, will see its wage move to $16.57 in January. Edgewater jumped to $15.02 this year and will increase to $16.52 next year. The impact of higher wages. 4 years after Denver adopted a higher minimum, it's challenging to find good data on the impact. A state Labor Department report in 2023 found that as Denver's minimum wage rose faster than the state's, some jobs were lost. But overall wages, not just for minimum wage earners, increased faster than in other cities. The report tried to isolate the negative economic effects of COVID, but data also lagged, so the report seemed incomplete, capturing stats just through mid-2021. Econ Northwest's report relied on some of the state's report, but also used a variety of data sources, such as the U.S. Census American Community Survey and wage and job data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It also looked at nearly 1,000 responses to the regional poll about minimum wage. Minimum wage earners also tend to be a small part of the overall labor force. Dyke estimated that 8% to 10% of workers in the Boulder region earn a minimum wage, which includes tipped workers who are paid $3.02 less per hour but can accept tips. Because they're the lowest earners, their impact on state sales tax revenues or gross domestic product may always be negligible. So it's more than just looking at pure data, he said. We don't see big effects, Dyke said, and that's where I think it's important to look at both the cost and the benefits and to take into account what stakeholders say. Jeffrey Zaks, a professor who tracks labor laws at the University of Colorado, believes that most workers, especially in Boulder, earn more than minimum wage due to the labor shortages a year after the pandemic struck and employers were desperate to find help. Wages soared in Colorado and elsewhere. As an economist, I am generally very negatively disposed towards these kind of policies. You're interfering with the market, Zaks said. You have to have a good reason if you're interfering, and a reason is not that people can't afford to live here. That's not an employer's responsibility. It's like asking an employer, look, you've got a worker who's worth $15 an hour, but he can't afford rent, so we want to pay him $20. If those regulations become binding, the employer is going to say, look, I'm going to step 2 feet outside of Boulder city limits. I'll move my business there. Meanwhile, in Denver, some of the city's top chefs are closing restaurants. Several South Broadway retailers are heading south for Englewood, and office buildings are now 34% vacant. On the other hand, companies and restaurants are still opening in the city, and Denver's unemployment rate in July was 4.3%, lower than Colorado Springs, Grand Junction, and Pueblo. A year ago, Denver's rate was even lower and only higher than Boulder and Fort Collins. Raising the lowest wage does give a group of earners a little more money, where higher earners likely see little to no impact, said Ben Zipperer, a senior economist at the left-leaning Economic Policy Institute. The lowest earners include a disproportionate number of women and people of color. If we do not raise the minimum wage, those are the people that continue to face the consequences of wage inequality, Zipperer said. When you raise the minimum wage, economic research does show that it reduces the number of people in poverty. That is both an important motivation and also an important consequence of a higher minimum wage. Can you bring marijuana to Denver International Airport? The Colorado Sun partners with GigaFact to investigate viral claims. This is by Justin George. No. Although Colorado legalized recreational marijuana in 2012, Denver International Airport has banned the possession, consumption, use, display, transfer, transport, distribution, and sale of the drug. The prohibition includes all airport grounds. Marijuana is also illegal under federal law through the Transportation Security Agency. The federal agency with jurisdiction over airport screening areas allows travelers to bring products that have up to 0.3% of tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC, the main psychoactive compound in marijuana. The legal threshold is far lower than the amount of THC found in recreational marijuana. Such a small amount can be found mostly in hemp products. DIA has no restriction on hemp. TSA states that its officers do not search for marijuana or other illegal drugs. But if any illegal substance is found during security screening, TSA will refer the passenger to local law enforcement. Then it is up to those agencies to decide what to do. Man arrested in Colorado dog breeder's killing, but the puppies are still missing. Information on possible motive not released, but suspect could face first-degree murder charge and aggravated robbery in connection with the killing. This by member of the Associated Press. A man suspected in the killing of a Colorado dog breeder found dead last week has been arrested, but the breeder's missing Doberman puppies have still not been found, authorities said Friday. Sergio Ferrer, 36, was arrested on August 24th, a few hours after the body of Paul Peavy, 57, was found on his property in the mountains just west of Denver, the Clear Creek Sheriff's Office has announced. Ferrer was considered a person of interest in Peavy's death at the time, but was initially arrested on an unwanted arrest warrant for failing to appear in court in Nebraska on a weapons charge, the office said. The sheriff's office said Friday that it had gathered enough evidence with the help of other law enforcement agencies to recommend that the district attorney's office file charges with him for first-degree murder, felony murder, and aggravated robbery in connection with Peavy's killing. The coroner's office found he had been shot, it said. Ferrer is being represented by the Public Defender's Office, which does not comment on its cases to the media. Sheriff's spokesperson Jenny Fulton declined to comment on whether Ferrer is suspected of stealing the puppies. Fulton did not release any information about a possible motive for the killing. Authorities have been trying to locate as many as 10 Doberman puppies missing from Peavy's property. Peavy bred European Dobermans, which are more muscular and considered to be the more protective than their American counterparts, said fellow Colorado breeder Meredith Mazzutis, who said that she mentored Peavy and sold him the offspring of dogs she imported from Europe. European Dobermans are also much more expensive, selling for a minimum of $3,500, she said. Peavy was selling his puppies for $4,500 each, she said. Mazzutis and Peavy's adult dogs, which she provided to him, were locked in the camper he lived in and weren't able to protect him. She has offered to take them back to her home once they are released by investigators. Peavy was a happy and trusting person who liked to get to know people directly rather than relying on other people's judgments about them, she said. We all adored him. Poop, pee, cocaine. People bring more than just tubes to Colorado rivers over Labor Day weekend. A new study on the impact of Labor Day festivities on Colorado rivers and streams doesn't say to stop tubing, just be mindful about what you bring with you. This by Shannon Mullaney. Coloradans taking to the water over Labor Day weekend might be bringing more than just inner tubes and floats with them, according to new research from the Colorado School of Mines and Johns Hopkins University. Researchers took a closer look at the water in Clear Creek as it flows through a popular tubing area in Golden over Labor Day weekend in 2022 to get an idea of recreational impacts to streams and rivers. The small pilot study found elevated levels of lead, bacteria linked to the human gut, and signs of painkillers, cocaine, and more in the water. You can almost think about it as a fingerprint of the activities that are going on, said Karsten Prassy, an assistant professor at the Whiting School of Engineering at Johns Hopkins University. Prassy and other researchers, included several at the Colorado School of Mines, combined their expertise in microbiomes, metals, and chemical compounds to offer a unique and holistic look at recreation's impacts on streams, published Thursday in ACS ES&T Water. The researchers found on a 1.5-mile stretch of Clear Creek, popular for water activities like tubing and rafting, they gathered supplies during and after Labor Day in 2022 from two locations, an upstream site near a suspension bridge off Clear Creek Canyon Road west of Colorado 93 and further downstream at Fort Street in Golden. The researchers found dozens of chemical compounds in the downstream location, which indicates they were introduced by the people recreating in Clear Creek, which begins near Loveland Ski Area. The creek also flows past the Coors Brewery in Golden and provides water for cleaning and other tasks in the plant, according to Axios. They saw compounds associated with personal care and pet products like flea medication and lidocaine, a local anesthetic that can be found in over-the-counter topical creams. A large fraction of the compounds were related to plastics, like the plastic additive phthalate, Prassy said. The researchers found signs of cocaine and painkillers, including acetaminophen, which is normally taken as a pill. What that probably means is that people are peeing in the water, which is not that surprising, Prassy said. We know from swimming pools that people do that all the time. They wanted to see if they could track mineral sunscreens, which includes metals like zinc, but found that any metals from sunscreen were indistinguishable from the metals already in the water. Not so much with chemical-based sunscreens, though. Common chemical compounds, avobenzone and oxybenzone, were found in Clear Creek, although the researchers did not tally the exact concentrations. These chemicals have been shown to harm corals in the ocean and algae in rivers, and they are banned in some places like Hawaii, he said. Chemical-based sunscreen filters are probably, in my opinion, the more concerning compounds because we know these UV filters can be problematic for aquatic species, Prassy said. The researchers also found that the microbiome in the water shifted significantly during the high use days. A lot of the bacteria that were introduced are associated with the human gut biome, which could be associated with poop particles coming off of people or animals, Prassy said. They did see more lead in the water, likely a legacy of mining in Colorado. Clear Creek was a location of some of the most intense early mining activities during the Colorado Gold Rush, and upstream mining activity likely deposited heavy metals on the stream bottom. The lead was likely suspended in the water in sediment kicked up by people, Prassy said. By their final sampling day, just after the busy weekend, all of the stream conditions were back to normal as compounds and suspended sediment moved downstream, Prassy said. Are there also potential implications for the ecosystem that's located downstream? He said. That's something we weren't able to address. Rivers under growing demand. The city of Golden is actively doing research on Clear Creek with help from the School of Mines. City staff is gathering data on tubing and pedestrian traffic and plans to share a report October 8th at a City Council study session, spokesperson Meredith Ritchie said. We are continuing to refine our processes to ensure the most accurate data is available, including cross-referencing with weather, camera data, and special event populations, Ritchie said in a written statement. Statewide water quality data has shown that animal waste, too much lawn fertilizer, trash, toxic algae, and storms washing pollutants off roads and into streams lead to pollution in waterways, according to the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. River recreation has benefits for quality of life in Colorado and the state's economy. Water sports directly contributed $1.1 billion to Colorado's gross domestic product, according to a 2020 report from Business for Water Stewardship, part of the environmental nonprofit Bonneville Environmental Foundation. Direct retail spending along the waterways in Colorado generates an estimated $9.9 billion in economic output. Colorado's rivers are likely to see even more use in the future. The state's population could reach 6 million by 2050, nearly double the 2008 population, according to a Conservation Colorado River assessment in 2020. Clear Creek is a tributary of the South Platte River, which received a D rating for water quality in the assessment because of impacts linked to wildfires, legacy mines, and warmer temperatures. So here are some tips for recreation. For Prassy and the research team, the pilot study sets the stage for future research, which could focus on a longer period of time or calculate the concentrations of compounds in the water. Without concentrations, you can't really say anything about any risks that might be there. We don't know if there's a risk, Prassy said, and there's a lot of benefits of recreational activities. Like a lot of things, there's pros and there's cons. Based on the 2022 Labor Day study, he said there is no reason for concern for people swimming in Clear Creek or for the environment. He encouraged people to use mineral sunscreens rather than chemical-based sunscreens, which have UV filters that are potentially problematic for humans and the environment. The goal is to encourage recreators to think mindfully about what they're taking on the water, whether it is skin products that can wash off of you, food, drinks, or anything else, Prassy said. The goal of this is definitely not to say, please don't go tubing. That would certainly send the wrong message, he said. There is more research that needs to be conducted to look into other potential negative implications of this. And with that, we thank you very much for your time here today. Once again, this has been the Colorado Sun, and my name is Andrew Post. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this program, please register for our free services at www.aftersight.org or by calling 303-786-7777.